Welcome to content providers concept in Android. This is one of the way of dealing with the data storage in Android. In Android, we can access data. Otherwise, we can store the data in different ways. One is by using files, local files. Second one is shared preferences. Third one is by using SQLite database. And the fourth one is content providers. Fourth one is content providers. In this video, you'll be studying what are content providers in Android theory. Now, of course, I prepared this content from developer.android.com website. You can refer that website for this information. Okay, now the first one. So content provider, what it will do, it will provide own UI for working with the data. We can tell like this: it provides its own interface in order to access the data. Okay, that's what this point. Okay, of course, here in Android applications, we see two things related to content providers. One is the one who provides this. Okay, we call them as provider, first one, and the second one is the client. In this video, I will explain the client. For suppose already there is a provider which provides some UI to interact with that data. UI which interacts with that to interact with that data. Okay, it is already existing. Now, as a client, we are supposed to access that particular provider. Okay, so now this content provider, for suppose in one app, okay, app one, for suppose content provider is available. This content provider will be used by client in another app, for suppose app 2. Okay, app 2. That's what content provider of one app should be used by another app only, generally. Then, so a developer with content providers will work with content providers in two scenarios. That is, one is implement the code to access the existing provider, accessing the existing content provider in another application. Otherwise, create a new content provider. Generally, with content provider as a developer, we do two things. Otherwise, we work in two scenarios. One is as a client, and the other one is, second point is provider. Means you create the content provider. That is what the second option is. Otherwise, you can access the existing content provider. Okay, so generally one app's content provider will be used by other app. Okay, so that is what about this slide. Now, so I think you are able to see this diagram. This is the database. The cylinder one is the database. That cylinder, that database or that data considered as data can be accessed by content provider by using its UI. Content provider provides an UI. By using that UI, we can access the data. Okay. So now, how we access the content provider? By using the content resolver. Through content resolver, we will access the UI of content provider. Now, the content provider in turn will help us to access the data. Okay. Now, of course, we can make use of cursor loader also. We have seen cursor, right? Just in other video related to SQLite, you can see that cursor. Okay. Now, similar to that cursor here, they use multi-threading concept. There is nothing but, first suppose when there is a UI, okay, UI like some edit text and buttons are present, okay, in the UI. So user interacting with this UI. While interacting with this UI, for suppose if your activity has to perform some other operation along with this interaction with the user. So here two operations. One is interaction with the user, another one is performing some operation for this activity only. So two methods has to be executed simultaneously. So that can be done by multi-threading. Okay. So if you want such kind of thing, then you have to use cursor loader. You have to use cursor loader. There's nothing but in the foreground some operation will be happening, and in the background some other operation can also be executed with the help of cursor loader. So if you want such kind of things, you have to use cursor. Generally, from the activity or from the fragment, we access the data through content provider, of course, by the help of content resolve. So activity, if you want a cursor loader, the cursor loader will interact with the content resolver. Now content resolver will interact with content provider and get the data. So that is a process here. That is how we access the provider. Okay. So let us see those points. So content resolver object. So all these are classes, and for all those classes we will be creating object, and by using that object and its methods will perform all those operations. That is what object oriented programming. Okay, right. So content resolver is also an object over here, and it is used to communicate with the provider as a client. Okay, right now already there is a provider, for suppose. Okay, let us consider there is a provider existing. We are trying to access the provider. In order to access that particular provider, you are supposed to use content resolver object. Okay, right. Now, of course, when you look at the content provider object, okay, otherwise the provider object. So that is nothing but it is an instance or object. Okay, instance or object, both are same, right? It is an instance of a class which implements content provider. For suppose you are creating one class implements content provider, so that class will become a content provider. For the class object, okay, is this provider object. So in our example, if you refer provider object, it is nothing but the implementing class of content provider object is the provider object. So what it will do? It receives the data request from clients. So we are talking about this content provider object. What it will do? It will receive from there. It will receive the request from the client. Who is the client? The client will be using the content resolver. Through content resolver as a client, provider object will receive the request, and then that requested operation or action will be performed. Finally, it will return the result. Okay, so the thing is, we are not directly interacting with the database, or we are not interacting directly with the data. But instead of that, we are asking the content provider through content resolver. Okay. Of course, it provides some basic operations, CRUD operations. What are those? C create or retrieve. There's nothing but select, U update, and D delete. Okay, those functions content resolver will provide for persistence work. That's nothing but from the database. If you want to perform these operations, then content resolver methods can be used. So here in the slide we discussed 2 points. Two objects. One is content resolver, another one is a content provider. Okay. Then accessing a provider. In the diagram, we have seen, we understood these points, these 3. Now we are moving to this one, content. So sorry, cursor loader. Now, so a common pattern for accessing a content provider from UI. Okay, it is a common thing. And the main part is asynchronous, to run an asynchronous query in the background. Okay, there's nothing but foreground one operation will be carrying on. In the background also some other operation also be performed. Suppose if you want to execute a query, that query will not disturb the main operation of the activity. When you use cursor loader, that is what asynchronous. Okay, it will run an asynchronous query in the background. That's what the activity or fragment. This one. Okay, in UI app UI, call a cursor loader to the query, which in turn gets, that is what this path. This point is about this path. within the activity or fragment. Okay. So what we will do, we will make use of this cursor loader as well as content wizard. We will make use of those two. Okay. These two in turn will make use of this content provider and perform the operation specified with the data storage or database. That's what this means. Okay. And this cursor loader allows UI to continue. UI to continue. That's what user will be interacting with. Otherwise, user will be interacting with the UI, the front available UI. Okay, while the query is running in the background, while the query is running in the back. That's what the importance of cursor loader. So they do this one by using the concept of multi-threading in Java. Right. Of course, there are a few built-in providers in our system, Android platform. Okay, built-in providers. One such provider is user dictionary. See, we are not creating a provider, a content provider over here. We are using the content provider. Okay, so for that we are making use of built-in providers. One such provider is user dictionary. So what it will do, it will store in an Android operating system. Otherwise, in Android mobile, there will be a content provider with the name user dictionary. What it will do, it stores spellings of non-standard words. Means those are not dictionary words, or no, those are not standard, but those will be used by the user. Like for suppose map reduce, precompiler, applet, okay, const, int. So these are not maintained as a language stuff, English language, but those should be maintained within the Android platform or Android mobile. For that, they are making use of this provider. Which one? User dictionary. It is a dictionary for this particular use. He wants to maintain these words as part of the dictionary. Okay, that's why user dictionary. Okay, those are not standard. Those cannot be placed inside the main dictionary. Okay, English dictionary, vocabulary. Right. Now, so we are going to use this. That's why this explanation. Now, so within the content providers, we have seen cursor loader, we have seen content resolver, content provider, right? And another one is content URI. Content URI. Okay. So what it will do, it will identify the data in the provider. It will identify the data. Okay. So it is like a path. It is like a path. It is like a path. Okay, we will see that example so that you can understand what is this content URI. Okay, so what it consists? It consists of authority and it consists of path. What is authority? Symbolic name of the entire provider. Symbolic name of the provider. Okay, that is also referred as authority. Okay, and some after that there will be some path. That path will point the table under that authority. Okay, point to a table under that authority, under that provider. Few tables are there, data tables are there. That table, this path will refer to. Okay, so that's what explanation. Content URI, which refers table name, is one of the arguments in the method called by client. There's nothing but within the client, we will be calling one method. We will be calling one method. Please, after 5 minutes. We are calling one method. Within that method, we will be passing one argument. We will be passing one argument. That argument is nothing but content URI. Content URI, it holds the table name. It holds the table name. Okay, so it refers the table name. So we see that one in code. We see that one in code. Now, content resolver object. It parses out the URI's authority. So that's nothing but we have seen in the previous diagram: content provider, content resolver, cursor load. Right. So we are talking about these two right now: content resolver as well as content provider. Okay. So content resolver, what it will do? It is an object. It parses URI's authority. It looks into that particular content URI and it will passes that authority, and it will find out who is the provider. It will resolve the provider. That's what the point. It will tell who is the provider, and there will be a system table. The Android operating system, or within the Android device, there will be a system table. That table is holding the details about all the providers. By taking that content URI, within that content URI, there will be URI authority. By using the URI authority, content resolver will find out whether it is the name of a provider or not by looking into a system table of known providers. So, a list of providers are maintained in one table. It will look into that particular table, and it will find that the specified URI authority is from that provider list or not. So that is what content provider generally do. Okay, sorry, content resolver generally do. Okay, after that, it identified it is one of the provider. It is identified that it is one of the provider, and then it can dispatch the query arguments to the correct provider. It will dispatch the query arguments to the correct provider. Okay, so the point here is content resolver will take the name of the provider. It will identify whether it is a valid provider or not. Then it will dispatch these arguments to that particular provider. That is what content resolver will do. Okay, one second. Okay, so we have seen content URI. So within that content URI, there will be authority as well as path. Authority is nothing but it is a symbolic name given to the provider. Path is nothing but the path of the table within that provider. Content resolver will look at that authority, and it will look into system table where there is a list of providers, and it will resolve that it is a provider, and it will dispatch the query arguments to that particular provider. That all those things will be done by content resolver. Okay. Now content provider uses the path part. Okay. So in content URI we have two parts. One is content provider name, symbolic name, and the second one is path. This path is used by the content provider. Okay, and it will identify which table to access. Okay, so generally a provider has a path for each table. For every table there is one path. Okay, one table one path, another table another path will be there. So by using that path, it will identify the table. So content resolver will use the provider name, and it will reach the provider. It will help to reach the provider. Once we reach the provider will look at the path, and it will identify the table. So that is what provided in content URI. Okay, when you look at one example, this is the example. So starting, you are supposed to write content : / we are supposed to write this one. Okay, it identifies it is a content URI. It tells it is a content URI. Up to this point, if you write, okay, it is a content URI. Then use a dictionary in our example. It is nothing but provider. Words, it is nothing but tables path. Okay, so by using that words, it will identify the table in the user dictionary. Okay, and then so we in content provider we have gone through what is cursor loader, what is content resolver, what is content provider, and then what is content URI, and what are the parts in the content URI, and how those parts are used, and then we are going to retrieve the data from the content provider, otherwise from the provider. Generally, how to do these things is the way of retrieving data from the provider by using two steps. One is permission, and the second one is define the code that sends a query to the provider. Okay, so from the content resolver, otherwise from the fragment or from the activity, we simply send a query To whom we send the query? We send that query to the content provider. We send that query to the content provider. But before that, we have to get the permission from the provider. Before that, we have to get the permission from the provider. Then only we can send the query to the provider. Now, how permission? How to get that permission? There's nothing but in the manifest file, in the Android manifest file, you have to make use of one tag or one node users permission. Okay, in that you have to specify exact permission name defined by the provider. Okay, for example, we are using user dictionary provider. Now in user dictionary provider, the permission is the name of the permission is read underscore user underscore dictionary. Name of the provider is user dictionary, and name of the permission to be obtained is user read user dictionary. Okay, so we have to get the permission to read the dictionary. So put this one in the Android manifest file when the app is installed. Otherwise, during the installation of the app, the Android system will ask the user, do you want to grant this permission or not? Okay, if the user grants, then your app will get a grant to access or your app will get a grant to read the user dictionary. So the same method what we follow for other permissions, the same thing. We write in the manifest file, and during the installation, otherwise while using that particular option, we will ask the permission from the user. When the user grants the permission, then that particular operation will be performed. Okay. So let us see one small example. To get a list of words and their locales from the user dictionary provider. Okay. So how to get that? Consider that there is an activity or a fragment. You are developing an activity or a fragment. Already it is there. You wrote the code, everything. Now to access the data through content provider, we are writing this statement. That's nothing but we are getting the content resolver by calling get content resolver. Okay, content resolver will call the methods of content provider, will call the methods of the content provider. So a content resolver object is obtained by using its object's method. One is query method. We are passing some arguments and we are trying to read the user dictionary. We are trying to read the user dictionary. There is nothing but similar to select query. After executing the select query, it will return a result set. That result set is stored in test. Okay. Now the first argument. What is the first argument? What is the second argument? If you want to know. So for this query method, the first argument is URI. That's what content URI. Okay. So content URI is stored in this. So user dictionary.words.content URI. So we are passing directly the particular thing. Okay. Then projection is stored here. That projection object is passed. That is what is the projection? Columns to return. This is similar to the query what we executed in SQLite. Same, but in the place of table name, here we are writing the content URI. The second one is the columns to be selected within that, and then where class related stuff. Within that where class, if there are any question marks, then how to fill that question mark, selection arcs, and if you want to specify order by class, so then you can specify that sort order also. Okay. So that is what URI. It is similar to the select query. So in select query, there will be from table, right? So that only URI means what? Name of the table. Okay, name of the table or the complete URI, that content URI you have to specify. Then projection is nothing but list of columns which are to be selected. Selection is nothing but where class. Selection arcs is nothing but when there are question marks, how to replace that particular question mark. If there is no question mark, then you can take this selection arcs as null, and you can place null or here also. There's nothing but no order is required. Okay, but content URI, that projection and selection are compulsory. Most of the times, the first two. Okay. So query methods calls. This is content resolver method. Which one? The query. It calls the client. This is the client. Calls content method defined by content provider. Here our example is user dictionary. Okay. So the thing is, content provider has some methods. Those methods would be called by content resolver methods. Content resolver methods. That's what I explained earlier. The query is the client, the content resolver method. That in turn will call content provider method, which is provided by, otherwise which is defined by that particular provider, content provider. Okay. So after getting the values into cursor, okay. So now you can read. First, you have to check whether cursor is null or not null. If it is not null, then only some data. There is no data. Okay. Then if it is not null, we are moving to the next. There's nothing but it will point the starting one. Okay. When you call for the first time, move to next, and from the starting one, it will get the values, and again it will go back and call the same method. It will go to the second one, read, go to third one, read, go to fourth one, read. There's nothing but in a cursor result set will be there. In a result set, there will be multiple. There is a possibility of multiple records. One at a time, one record the cursor will point. By calling move to next, it will be moving to the next record, next record. By moving to the each record and by reading the values, we can get all the values from the cursor. So that is what how to read through cursor. That's nothing but how to retrieve the data by using content providers. And then how to insert. See, this concept is almost similar to the concept what we have studied in SQLite in terms of insert, update, delete queries. Okay. Now, but instead of writing the name of the table directly, here we will be specifying the content URL. We will be specifying the content URL. So within the content provider, they are providing the content URI. Okay, we are using that content URL, and we are calling the insert method. Which insert method? Content resolvers insert method. Now, how to get the resolver object? By calling get content resolver method. So we get the content resolver object. Within that, we are calling insert method by passing the content URI and content values. I mean that the values what you want to insert. So that is one object. Where new values is one object of type content values. In this content values, we are placing values in the form of key and value. So the column name. Column name will also specify the content provider. Content provider has to specify the column name. So the column is user dictionary dot. This is our default content provider. Words. Okay, words is name of the table. Dot app ID. App ID is name of the column. Like that. Locale is one column. Word is another column. Frequency is another column. Like that, we have 4 different columns in that words table, and the values are user, example.user, en_us, insert, and these are the values which are to be placed inside the database. So we are framing, we are generating contents values object by putting key value pairs according to the content provider's table. According to the content provider's table, okay, keys will be the content provider provided keys only. Okay, and values are your choice. And then we are calling insert method, and the data will be inserted. Similarly, the next one is update. Again, content values is framed. Okay, otherwise content object, content values object is created, and then we are taking 2 strings for selection clause and selection argument. The selection clause is where class, and selection args are nothing but when there is a question mark, you have to specify how that question mark has to be replaced. So within the selection class, there is one column like the question mark. Column like value should be there in the query. In the place of that value question mark, that question mark should be replaced with this selection args. Means what? Instead of writing this entire statements in the method calling, we can make use of this variables. We can make use of this variables. Okay. So get content resolver, calling update, and passing the content URI. Then update values. What is update values? It is content values. Within the content values, what we are doing? We are putting null. Okay, where we are putting null? In locale. Put null. We'll put null. No need to pass null. We have to specify the name of the column. The name of the column is specified through content provider, and so in that place null will be placed. When there is locale like en underscore something, then over there null will be placed. That is what we updated. So selection clause is a variable. Selection
Sir.
arguments is a variable which specifies 2 minutes. Last slide I will complete. Okay, and that is what update. Similarly, we can go for delete also. Delete URI, selection class, selection arguments. Okay.